Hey folks, welcome back, and it's Mother's Day weekend. And guess what I'm thinking about? Not Mom, sorry, but Christmas. What about Christmas specifically? Well, about that traditional drink that's served along the river parishes, Cherry Bounce. Why am I thinking about Cherry Bounce now on Mother's Day weekend? Well, in order to make a good batch of traditional River Parish Cherry Bounce, you need to be collecting those native black cherries now. They're found all along the southeast, along the Gulf Coast, and they are necessary to make a traditional Cherry Bounce the way my ancestors made it. So in this episode, I'll give you two recipes, one from Chef John Folse's Encyclopedia of Cajun and Creole Cuisine, as well as from a longtime favorite River Parish treasure, Miss Olga Laurent, who is renowned for her cherry bounce all up and down the Vacherie area. So stay tuned so you too can learn how to make your own version. The native wild black cherries found along the Gulf Coast are the key ingredient for making a good traditional cherry bounce. These cherries are about a 1/4 inch diameter versus the 1 inch diameter ones that you see from up north. They're burgundy in color, and they are usually available in late May. Usually around Mother's Day they seem to be ripe in the South Alabama area where I'm making these. The leaves are serrated and green, and the bark is noted to be grayish and not terribly rough and runs horizontally around the tree. Hopefully these pictures here will give you an idea what you need to be looking for this essential ingredient for a good bounce. So the first step for either of these recipes is going to rinse the cherries well under running water and make sure you pick through all the stems and make sure everything's clean. Run it through a sieve and just sift through it. For my picking, I ended up with 4 cups, so I'm going to use that for both of these recipes you'll see. To make the full recipe in the Encyclopedia of Cajun and Creole Cuisine calls for 1 gallon of the wild native black cherries, 16 cups of sugar, and 2 cups of whiskey. I ratioed these down for my little experiment to 2 cups of black cherries, half a cup of granulated sugar, and 2 cups of whiskey. Now, first step is going to be to combine the cherries and the sugar. I just simply reused the whiskey bottle that I was making it in, and I stuck the cherries in there first, then followed with the sugar, and basically alternated it back and forth until I filled up the bottle with the contents that I had available. The only big problem I could see doing it this way was trying to stick all those cherries through the opening of the whiskey bottle. I had to use a funnel, but in the end, just basically using a spoon and kind of using my hand to kind of guide it in did the trick. Now time to add the whiskey. The contributor of this recipe, Gary Anderson, recommended using J.W. Dant for his whiskey, but I used Early Times. That's kind of the house blend, and plus it was inexpensive enough. So you fill it up, and you can see you got all the sugar and the cherries in there, and you simply start shaking it and try to dissolve as much of that sugar as possible. You won't get it all that first time, but you'll have to do this throughout the next couple of weeks. If you follow the amounts in the encyclopedia, you're going to put this in a crock and cover with cheesecloth and put it in a cool, dark place for 6 months. In my case, since I used the whiskey bottle, I stuck a coffee filter with holes in it and put a rubber band around it and kept it in a cool, dark place. This allows any of the gases that are formed through the reaction of the sugar and the yeast on the fruit to release, as well as keep other things out. Now comes the fun part. After 6 months, go ahead and strain the wine, taste it for quality, and bottle it. It'll keep reacting a little bit, and it's going to be best served at Thanksgiving and Christmas time. There you go, a beautiful bottle of traditional Cherry Bounce. The second recipe is from renowned Cherry Bounce maker Miss Olga Laurent, born 1903 and died in 1990, a beloved St. James Parish teacher. For this recipe, I suggest you at least get a gallon of wild cherries as well as a gallon of whiskey, but it can be used with any amount of cherries. Add cherries into a clean glass container or jar and mark a 1/2 inch above the top level. Go ahead and fill up with your whiskey to that 1/2 inch mark. Miss Laurent was reported to like to use Old Crow whiskey. For this experiment, I went ahead and used my Early Times. Once again, I have 2 cups of cherries and about 2 cups of whiskey, but whatever it takes to get to that 1/2 inch mark. As before, we're going to cover the jar with either a fine cloth or a coffee filter like I did with some holes poked into it.
This is going to allow any gases that are created during the reaction to escape, as well as prevent any critters from getting in there. This time we're only going to let it sit for 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, we're going to strain into another container and keep the cherries. You may be thinking to yourself, what are we going to do with these cherries? Well, you got to stay tuned to the end to find out. You can see how after just 6 weeks, the cherries steeping in the whiskey has imparted a beautiful color to it, as well as given it a nice cherry aroma. Now taking 1 cup of sugar and 1 cup of water, we're going to bring the water to boil and we're going to dissolve that sugar to make a simple syrup. After your syrup is made, let it get back to room temperature. Then comes the next step. We're going to mix the cherry whiskey with the simple syrup and pour back into the bottle. You can see we've got another beautiful bottle of Cheery Bounce that we're going to go ahead and store in a cool, dark place, so allow the reactions to continue until Thanksgiving or Christmas. Use the 1-to-1 mixture to get the kind of strength that you really like for the flavor and adjust the sweetness. Bonus recipe, Miss Olga Laurent's cherry wine. Remember those cherries we had from before? You're going to put them back in that jar and now fill it up with white port. Miss Laurent used Taylor white port, but all I could find was Fairbanks. So we're going to try this. It's like a softer version of the Cheery Bounce, but you reuse those whiskey infused cherries. After 6 weeks, you strain and bottle. You can see that the cherry wine is a lighter colored liquor and not quite as dark as the Cheery Bounce that's on the left. For comparison's sake, you can see to the left to right is the John Folse recipe, Olga Laurent recipe, the Olga Laurent wine, and the base whiskey early times. As with all alcohols, please enjoy responsibly.
Thank you for tuning in. If this video has been helpful for you, please share and give it a like, as well as subscribe to the David J. Hubble YouTube channel. Also, click that bell to be alerted to upcoming episodes of new videos of Old River Parish recipes that I come across. Here's to your health. It's good.